Are we streaming? It says we're streaming. Let's check the index. How do I know? Does anyone know how I know? Live streaming. I thought I just had it up. Sorry, guys. Live. Stream health. Okay, that means we're live. I'll take it. Okay, so this first slide has content, as per not usual. So this talk is what's new in ES 2017. The committee is the TC39. I'm going to talk about this, but they are the pedantic type, and they insist that we don't call it ES8. I haven't seen this written too many places. Like the spec is called ECMAScript version 8. You know, but apparently they're like very touchy about this, and they really don't want people to call it ES8. They want people to call it ES 2017. I would have really preferred if it was just ES 17. I think people would be an easier pill to swallow, just one more character, but that's just an aside. So yeah, I want to talk very briefly about what the ECMA committee is. So it's the European Computer Manufacturers Association. They do a lot of things, but apparently looking at their website, one of the things they're most proud of is this language. So that's kind of cool. So there are technical committees. Technical Committee 39 is the one that happened to be running JavaScript. I got curious, and if you go on their website, you just change like 39 to 38, and it's like something about food or something. It's like different things. I don't know what they were, like some kind of planning committee, but anywho, the Technical Committee 39 is the one. And how many of you have heard like TC 39? Cool. Okay, great. So that kind of tells me how quickly to move here. So I like this little comic, annual Pedants Conference. Well, not so much a conference exactly, more anyway. I could see myself saying this. So they have a couple. This is like straight off of their website. They have a couple goals and scopes and things that they try to. They're very organized. And one of the things that's kind of funny about them, if you look, I'll show you after the talk. Like if you look at their website, it's all. A lot of the websites are just like straight HTML, just like straight HTML with no styling whatsoever. Just like a table on the page that's just there and deal with it. It's kind of fun. But anyway, they're an old crowd in a good way. They know their stuff. So the spec revision, the kind of flow of it happens like this. In February, they make a draft. I'm going to talk about all these like different stages and things are, but I'm just trying to give you a sense for like what the flow is and why we have a new JavaScript. I feel like it's important to cover. So in February and March, they have a 60-day royalty-free opt-out period. There's a lot of politics that goes along with the committee stuff. I gave a talk a while ago. I can do again sometime in a couple months if everyone's interested. But there's a lot of politics as far as like who's on the committee and what things get done and what things don't get done. And many of the people on the committee like disagree and they argue and they like butt heads a lot. So like the class syntax, for instance, that we all use in React constantly, like there were people on the committee that fought tooth and nail to like not let that get into the language, because the real reason for having it was like, so all the Java programmers can have an easier time because they complain a lot. It's like literally the reason, or one of them. But so in any case, I thought it would be kind of cool to show. They have on the GitHub, they have their meeting notes. So I thought it's fascinating to me anyway where they meet. So like in 2016, they were at Salesforce and Mozilla, Google, Microsoft, Netflix, Facebook. And then this year, PayPal, Mozilla, Google, Microsoft, Boku, Airbnb. So also I noticed when I was looking, the Mozilla password at the Mozilla HQ in San Fran is Mozilla guest, no password. I'm sorry, the Wi-Fi is Mozilla guest, no password. Just thought you should know that. So there are stages, right, that they move the specs through, and there's a process for moving them through, and I'll kind of go over that very quickly. But stage 0 is like rough idea, and then by the time you get to stage 4, it's like, okay, it's out there, it's good, it's done. We have to live with this forever now. The committee, one thing I do want to mention, like the committee is very dedicated, it seems like, to not having breaking changes. It's something that's like ridiculously important to them. And so when we talk about, someone remind me, I don't know if I put it in the slides, but we talk about array.includes later. I'll mention it. So this is so stage 0 is called strawman. So the description I gave is landing zone where we can kind of like gather ideas on what the spec is supposed to be and like what what we're actually trying to accomplish and why. So you can look on GitHub at these specs, and it's a pretty open system, and you can see how people put them together. So an example of some things that are currently at stage 0 are a function bind syntax, which is just : cancellation API, which would be really cool for async functions and iterators. A pattern matching syntax like Rust. What other languages have like that kind of pattern matching?
Pascal.
Pascal?
No. Pascal.
I don't know Pascal. Huh?
That's it.
Oh, Haskell.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you said Pascal. I was like, I don't think Pascal has pattern matching, but I guess I don't know Pascal. So,
The first thing you heard me say that.
do you know why it's called Haskell?
The curry guy.
Yeah, that was his name was, and that's the same reason why we call it currying. It has nothing to do with food. There was a guy named Haskell Curry. What's the third? Oh, really? The guy liked his functional programming, right? And so like another one is like built-in.is, built-in.typeof. Like there's an npm is. So one thing that I want to mention that's very interesting about how these languages, how these decisions are made, there's a lot of talk about like TypeScript and npm packages. I kind of have the theory just from their tone of you read these that they think npm is like a joke, and they think TypeScript is stupid. That's what I gathered from it. But the point is that there are specs where they say when they're talking about it, if you read through their discussions and their like Usenet things, they're saying in the email chains, they'll say like, well, we could do it that way, but TypeScript already does it this way, so we should probably do it that way. It's really interesting because it's a little bit of a circular dependency there, where like TypeScript is like trying to like fit into accept decorators, #YOLO, is trying to fit into JavaScript, and at the same time JavaScript's trying to like, oh well, but TypeScript, and then so in this example, like with the spec, they're talking about this npm is, if you've ever used it, that's for is stuff. You know, is this a function? Is this a boolean? Is this a what? Is this a nan? Is, you know, those kinds of things.
One other cool thing about the stages in Babel is people often, when they propose specs, they often do provide an implementation, and then you can actually download and use with Babel, which is awesome. I don't know any other language that does that.
Yeah, to play with it. So
CSS. It does. Proposed CSS implemented.
I don't know if we can call it a language.
Proposed feature as individual plugins. It's where Babel got a lot of its inspiration from.
I think it is pretty neat. Like, so the Babel.
Sure.
Interestingly enough, if I didn't know this until I started making this presentation, but the Babel build process is actually like a kind of like an ingrained part of the language committee like evolution, because they're all using Babel. A lot of them are. And one thing I saved you from in this talk, but I kind of wish I hadn't, is it's actually very interesting to ask the question of like, who are the people that go to these committees, you know? And who they are is mostly, it's mostly like very technical people. They don't have a strict no lawyers rule, but I think it's like kind of strict. And it's mostly like very technical people who are trying, or that have like whatever their requirements are. So that's why you see them at Google and Facebook and PayPal. Because, you know, Douglas Crockford was at PayPal, at least at the time, I think, when they had that one. And, you know, whoever, Rob Geismer was at Google, and, you know, the people that are influential in the JavaScript world. So, in any case, proposal, stage 1 is proposal. So this is like, okay, we decided this is worth working on. They have a criteria, by the way. What I was just trying to say is they have a criteria for how you move things up through different stages. So that's kind of interesting. But and one of them is like putting it into production, right, or with a Babel plugin, basically. They don't say Babel, but it's pretty clear that they're talking about Babel. So the goal at this point is to identify what the problem space like really looks like and what the challenges are and what we're trying to solve. And then also they have this thing they call a champion. I don't know if you guys played Breath of the Wild, you're missing out if you didn't, but it's like champions it's like the leader of the person, like they're the person we point at if there's a problem. Sometimes there are more than one champion per ticket or per whatever change, but optional chaining, safe navigation is by far the most exciting thing I think I have seen in JavaScript in a long time. That allows you to say, instead of saying like, let's say you have an object that's a.b.c.d, you can say, if you want to get at D, but all of those things in between might not be there, you have to say like a and a.b and a.b.c and a.b. You know. But the optional chaining guy, or like safe navigation, in C# they call it the null Koleski operator or whatever, the Elvis operator. It allows you to you say A question mark dot, B question mark dot, C question mark dot, D. And if any of those things, the thing they say in C# is like if not then dot if. Anyway, there's like a little phrase, but I guess it's meaningless if I don't remember it. But it's like it's very catchy. It's like if not then dot. Anyway, something like that. If something then null, if not then not. But numeric separators I think is awful. It's a really stupid thing and should not be in a programming languages, and it's really annoying, especially since different cultures and languages have different numeric separators. So it's like adds a huge parsing overhead and is really stupid, but it's there. Observables. This thing called realms, which I'm not going to talk about, but it's very interesting. You can go look at it. They have another thing called frozen realms, which sounds like a Secret of Mana level or something. I don't know what it is. It's pretty cool. Generator arrow functions. It's getting there. That one's probably definitely going to go in, I think. There are some people at Netflix that are like really jazzed about generator arrow functions, so they're pushing that, and they're on the committee. So, and then do expressions. We ran into a case this week where I was like, how can I do this? And I slacked Rob like, how can I do this? And you're like, well, with do expressions you could do it. But anyway, stage 2. So, sorry about the animations there. So, stage 2 is draft. So basically, draft is like pretty good. Like it's pretty definitely going to be there in some form. They wouldn't waste their time taking up to draft, but it is absolutely experimental. So there's a question I can just tell you that we ask in our interviews. I'm not afraid to say out loud, which is I ask people, what do you think about using Babel stage 0 transformations in a like production project? And the answer I'm looking for is A, do you know what Babel is? B, do you know what stage anything is? And C, is your answer anything but no? Because sometimes I guess sometimes you have to. I'm a little bit of a hypocrite because there are 2 stage 2 transformations that we're using right now, but we sort of have to because to like make Flow happy. And they're like class members is the one of them. But decorators was one. I really want decorators in JavaScript, but unfortunately there's some things that made it not follow the stage 2, like the first stage 2 spec. It's been revised. So if you look on like the Angular 2 use decorators very heavily, and if you look on their documentation, it's like Angular plain JavaScript, Angular 2 TypeScript, Angular 2 TypeScript with decorators. Ooh, fail, guys. So the thing I'll say is I would say don't use if you can avoid it. Don't use anything that's stage 2 or below that's not totally trivial to change. So if we wanted the Babel stage 2 things that we're using, the kind of cutoff is like, well, that'd be like trivial to change. Decorators, for instance, are not trivial to take out. Use a lot of higher order componenting and things because it's so awesome.
Do you say that only now that we're past ES 2015?
No.
I know, like way back then, a ton of people were using stage 0 everywhere because they wanted arrow functions and generators, and they didn't care. And like, it was pretty common knowledge that like these are going through. Everyone was using
Sure,
them,
but
like,
let's look at history though. So I could say the very same thing about decorators.
I didn't use them.
No, I know, but I'm
Yeah.
saying we used to sit over there. I actually once John was like,
And if you need
no.
you could do a code shift and get rid of all of them. I don't
yes,
think
there are
it's
code
as
mods
risky
out
as
there.
your-
Yeah, I
as
get
your
you. It's
prevention.
not super bad depending. I think the results vary. That's what I was trying to say is results vary depending on the transformation. So some transformations, like that's what my argument is, like the static class member business transformation got us so many wins, and it's so easy to undo. And I don't have a Facebook. I don't necessarily have anything for Facebook. But like Facebook's style is that when they introduce things that like REST, like object REST, that need to be polyfilled in, or that need to be babbled in. If later it changes, they have to make they call them code mods that they can just run on their code to like fix it automatically. They don't have they can't afford to go through and like fix every little thing up. So I don't mind using things so Facebook is through using Flow is using some stage 2 things right now. I don't mind because I know that if it ever has to change, they're going to have to make a code mod and they're going to publish their code mod and I'll just use it. So that was the sort of like logic process. So you can follow whatever you want, but it's just an interesting thing. I'm sorry, by the way, I hope I'm not bothering anyone going so in depth about the stages, but it's something I think people don't know a lot, like what the process is or how to look them up. And it's kind of an interesting thing because if you're not careful, like with decorators, So I actually made the case when I started here to John, like, man, let's use decorators. She's like, no, it's stage 2. And I'm like, ah, come on, it's stage 2. It's gonna be there. I look at all the other stage 2 things. It's like the first thing in a while that was stage 2 that changed substantially. He's like, hell no, we can't do it. So we didn't do it. And then like a week later, it was like the news came out that they were changing it. They were breaking the API of how it worked. And it's like, okay, all right. Arbitrary precision integers. Who doesn't want that? Trim start and trim end. String.prototype. Promise.finally. Class property decorators, as I showed you before. So those are just some examples. I wanted to show you a really quick thing about so people talk about the JavaScript spec. I'm not sure people know that unlike some languages, when you say like next version of Go, you're talking about like a binary that you get from somewhere, right? But for JavaScript, the next version of JavaScript is literally a text document, a spec that describes in pseudocode what should happen or like what the behavior of the language is. So this was the one I'm happy that it was the first one that I thought would be a short one, and it happened to be a short one. So this has own property. So like we're asserting, type O is an object and property P is on the object and, pseudocode. So I just want to be clear that you can go look up the pseudocode. It's not terribly hard to read if you're okay with it. But that's important for us as front-end developers because what that means is that it's not like you can just, like with Go, that you can just go download it and start using it in production and it's like, then that's your thing. You have to, there's like stages of browser support, and so that's where things like can I use and what are those tables called? It starts with a K. Have all the browser support. What is it? Kagx? Yeah, something like that. KangusX. Yeah, so it's like you don't have to do that with a lot of other languages. But one of the reasons for is because like the JavaScript virtual machine or V8 or whatever you're using is implemented by people other than the people who make the spec. Literally speaking, I mean, I guess practically speaking, they're the same people because they're the ones who go to the committee. Because why wouldn't they? But okay, stage 3. Sorry again about the things. So this is a candidate level. So stage 3 is like you can pretty well bet your bottom dollar. So all the semantics, all the syntax, all the little things have been pretty well figured out. So we have rest spread in there. I just thought it was interesting. There's a function.toString revision to just like kind of tidy it up a little bit. There's some regex stuff, sticky flag, look behind, which would be cool. Name groups, which would be even cooler. We have a crazy regex thing where we're like parsing HTML, like who knows what it is from the SEC. It's like crazy HTML content that can come up like any direction, and we have to write like a bajillion regexes and like dynamically like hot push them together because sometimes it's crazy. So it'd be cool to have name groups.
Do the name groups come back in the object as a property?
I'm not sure how it works. I just know that you can name in the regex. You can name like there, which would be super useful. I mean, we do it anyway, but there's a like really nasty thing we have to do with like turning the strings into a regex, and we have to escape all this shit in the string. It's like really bad, but it's not. We're kind of like stretching the way that it's supposed to. What are you laughing about, Brent? All right.
That last line of import,
Huh?
import.
Yep.
Is that you can import at any time? Is that what that feature is?
Yeah, you can. I think it's for when you have like condition. It's almost like preprocessor statements. I think in some languages, the way that I just recalling from looking at this one, sometimes depending on what happens in the code, you might not want to import certain things like an SVG or something like that. I guess, or like require them. And so this is a way to kind of get around that. There's argument in this. If you look at this thread and others, there's a lot of argument about like lifting certain restrictions about like where you can import to. Is another thing. Huh? Yeah, and some people hate that.
Allow you to import anywhere?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so this, you pass it like a URL and it'll return the promise the results to the imported file. It's funny because Webpack does this, but they kind of hijacked it with magic comments, so you can name it a chunk. Not a huge fan of that, but they did it, so now it's the standard. Yeah, this is super useful. It's analogous to require.ensure or some of the other async require stuff. If any of you ever use require.js or browser reply,
Yeah, absolutely. All right, stage 4. So stage 4 is all about, you know, that's what this talk is supposed to be. I'm sorry, we'll keep on screaming through, but that's the way that stage 4 works is that they push it out, and this is quoted in the soonest practical standard revision. So there are things that are in stage 4 now that were in stage 4 before they made a practical revision that are not going out. I'm not really sure what the process is for that. It's like I couldn't find really a clean definition for who determines what the soonest practical revision is. Because if it doesn't mean that anything that's stage 4, whenever there's a release, has to get pushed out, then like, I don't know. So that's something I don't know. But this is what it looks like on GitHub. So you can see these are the current finished proposals that are expected to publish, and I'm going to talk about the ones that are going to go out. So like lifting template literal restriction is one that's expected. It's finished. It's stage 4, but it's not being released until 2018. Okay, so this one's a fun one. Array.prototype.includes. So just use Lodash. You don't need to do this. If I don't like something that is often confusing for people is, you know, like in JavaScript, some languages there's like a null call paradigm where you can say like null dot some value, or you can put like give null some parameters and call something with it. It'll just do nothing. What's the big deal? But JavaScript cacks at you if you do that. So the way to get around that is to just use Lodash. So you would just say includes ARR comma EL. But anyway, it's in the language now, so it's kind of like a brother to array.filter or array.map, right? So this was from the spec, like what the reason or the motivation they said for wanting to do this. I consider it, at least I consider it a code smelt to do the index of, what did they even say? They use some bit twiddle. I thought it was great that they put that in there, the bit twiddling. Yeah, now you have includes. So it includes, yeah, so it uses the same value 0, which Lodash also does for comparison. So, you know, nan includes nan is true in the array, right? So that's kind of nice. Any questions about that one? Yeah.
I think by bit twiddle they mean the tilde operator, which is like binary.
Yeah, you can say tilde 1, and it's like, no, we don't want to do that. Yeah, people do that. I didn't know that you could. I would probably scream if I saw somebody doing that, because it's like that is way harder than you needed to make it, you know. But that's how it is, I guess. Exponential operator, very easy and straightforward. You're a fan of this one?
Oh yeah.
Yeah? Why? I would really like to know like why it's that useful. Oh, it's not. Okay. Isn't there like math.pow
Yes.
already? So I don't know. Okay. Anyway, the more statistically minded of us, I guess, are interested in this, and it's a pretty easy feature to add. The side effect, of course, is that you have to now add an assignment version. So you can say A ** equal 2, or B ** equal 3 on that third line to do 3 cubed. So that's pretty cool. Do you guys think it's like, would anybody use this? I wouldn't use it. I don't think. What for? I don't know. In Go, they're talking about right now for Go 2 taking out things from the standard library because they're tired of maintaining it. And one of the things Ken Thompson insisted tooth and nail that complex numbers were in the language, but like nobody uses them. It's like nobody uses it, but they've like a lot of work has gone into maintaining it. Can it just be a package that Google can make it? It doesn't matter. But can it not be in the standard library? I don't know. I feel like that with this. So object.values. Oh, I didn't say something. I'm sorry. I forgot something. Array.includes. Why is this not array.contains? It's because, you know, yeah, it was, would move? No, it's not a language conflict.
There's a library, old library called MooTools.
Yeah, MooTools.
Which will look at the global scope and add an array.prototype.contains. And the TC39 committee was like, well, obviously we can't break, you know, this whole library.
Yeah, really. That's like a real conversation they had.
There was like massive debate on this proposal, like it should be contained, but it has to be includes because we can't break this library.
The string hat includes first. I mean, string.includes in the S2050, didn't it?
What is we can look it up. There's a I'll show you real quick. We'll do this on the fly. On in the let's see it. Okay, if I can't find it in 2 seconds, GitHub TC39. Boom. They argue about this like incessantly, and actually, if you read the there's another like offline, yeah, this. Guess whose face shows up in the like original discussion. You guys recognize this guy? That's Mr. Lodash, by the way. John Dalton, the man himself, speaking up. But anyway, it's just a funny thing. So yeah, the MooTools. Just a heads up, I pinged MooTools core to inquire about fast pathing a patch release for a radar.
3 years ago. 3 years ago, they've been talking about this.
Yeah. So I don't know. They talk about the thing. So the proposal was formerly a radar contains, was not web compatible, and that's what that link is that I just clicked. And then so now they're moving to array dot includes. Anyway, that's what I meant when I said earlier. It wasn't baseless. What I said about the committee is like super concerned about compatibility. They'll do things that are crazy to their language to just not break stuff. And a lot of languages are way more like would not care, like break MooTools. I don't give a shit. Like nobody would care. But anyway, not in JavaScript. So array.values, array.entries. So this is what Rob was talking about earlier in the destructuring talk. Two new things on the object prototype. So you can say object.entries. It's kind of like they added object.keys and something like that, similar sort of thing. There's a function here, object.entries, and it will give you an array with every item in the array is a tuple, if you want to think of it that way, that has foo. In this case, foo is the first property, so it has property value. In JavaScript, also I guess people don't often know because you can get away with it. In JavaScript, object keys have to be strings, right? I realized recently, like, I don't know, that's maybe not straightforward. So if I said object.entries 1:1 2:2, it's going to give me the first thing instead of foo would be the string 1, and instead of r would be the string 2. Okay, and then object.values, similar sort of deal. It's like you can think of it as the brother or sister or whatever, sibling to object.keys. Just gives you out an array with all of the values. So there be dragons here, right? Just with object.keys. Don't rely on object.keys' order. Don't rely on object.values, like what the order is. If you see somebody in your code base saying like object.values and then putting brackets around it to like address an array location, call a bug on that shit, because it is. It will break. But it will break subtly, and it'll take months to find.
Can anyone think of a practical example for using object.entry?
So the one that Rob was mentioning is that, I'll just type it out here real quick, is that you want to say
You want the key and value.
I can see a good reason.
Or if you just want to use like map filter reduce operation,
Yeah.
then just think about processing anything.
Exactly. You can do it in a functional way.
Yeah, that's when I have wanted it the most.
I think the interface to the new map object also accepts object entries as constructor.
so here's how you do that in Lodash, guys. You say right? Snazzy stuff. I'm like it's like the Rust people are about Rust. That's how I am about Lodash. So, like, why wouldn't you do this? Or why would you need object.entries when you could just do this?
Because it's a library.
Ah, okay. So what's wrong with that?
That's why you as well. That's
I know, but like, okay. So like one step
How
further.
do I install this? I have two choices, right? I use npm, or I use like Bower, or I download a JS file that's minified, or I don't want to do any of that stuff. I just want to open my browser and write it. And that's why.
Not to be like cranky, but I think like the dot, the method chaining syntax, the pipe looking syntax is just cleaner. That's
If it wasn't for that pesky null call problem, I would be all the way on your side.
But
Right.
we're adding that to the language, so you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, right, yeah, it's no joke. So then what we'll be able to do then, so we'll be able to say x dot map kaboomel. I will absolutely use it at that point. I would be happy to throw Lodash away. The problem is that I'm probably going to, between now and then, get really hooked on the shorthand syntax, and that's going to screw me. That's what I'm guessing. because that can just say like, hey, you know. Anyway,
What's that
okay.
feature called? Question mark?
It's called the null. What do they call it? Safe navigation.
Safe navigation.
That's stage 0 right now.
Stage 2.
Is it does it work the same way as in CoffeeScript?
Yeah, I think I'll show you. This is actually probably a good thing to do very quickly. I'll show you where you can find this out. It's in test 262 for the latest JavaScript, and then down, I think. Oh, okay. Proposal. Oh, wait, what?
PRO.
I don't bother. I have a linguistics degree, so I get to say I don't care, right? That's okay. Anyway, never mind. So safe. Anywho, this is the list, TC39/proposals, and you can see here they have like all the different. I swear, wasn't it called optional chaining? I think that's what they call it, optional chaining. Yeah, and so here they give an example. Right? This is sorry, I'll make it bigger. Right? So the analogies they give are the null conditional operator in C#. I thought it was called null coalescing, but anyway, optionals in Swift, existential operator in CoffeeScript. Yep. So this will be fabulous. I think this will be like the best thing that happened to JavaScript in an extremely long time. I'm very happy for this feature. But anyway, let's keep padding along. So we have the left pad thing. So do you guys know about the left pad? Is that like, so basically there was an npm package called left pad. Very often people are a little bit, they swing both ways about whether IDs of sorts like from a database are strings or numbers. And so sometimes you'll get something that has all like Arabic numbers in them, but really it's a string because it's like we care about certain, like sector codes in the stock market are strings. They're strings because even if they start with zeros, or actually better example, zip codes are strings, right? I lived in Massachusetts and my zip code was 01002. My zip code was not 1011002, right? So similar sort of thing, we have left padding and string padding. So you can see what it does here. You probably, while I'm chatting, you can probably get an idea for it. So pad start is useful and pad end are useful if you want to add zeros to a number. I think that's far and above the common case for this feature. There's also trim start and trim end. There was arguing about whether it should be trim left or trim right. I'm not even sure what they argued about it. It was just a thing I saw when I was looking at this.
Language directions.
So I thought that too, but there is like a bit. There's like in the byte array there is like an order to them, right? Forget about language for a second. They are stored in memory in an order. It is actually not arbitrary to say like it's about the language direction. I don't think it's any more clear to say trim left, no matter what the language is. But I understand why it could be confusing to people. But then, isn't trim start just as confusing if you're talking about a right to left
I
language?
think it might be more confusing because then it'll have to change based on the lookout, right? Because one is start, then it depends on the lookout.
Yeah.
See, this is why things change.
That's a good point. Trim left is yeah. So you've now convinced me that trim left. Okay, I'll polyfill that in and trim left.
This was just a troll against NPM, right? Like,
No, I don't think it was. I think that from reading the discussion I saw when I was adding this, I think that they're sensitive about the language being harmed by things that they could have just done better. So I make this argument a lot. Like when people push back to me, it happens. So John, who is one guy, he left, but anyway, one guy who pushes back against Lodash in my need for speed on it. The reality is that I would happily. So in like Go, I don't need a Lodash. I don't care. It's got most of the things you need. It's already in the language, and it's good, and I want to use it. But like the Lodash for each is faster than the native for each, for example. It shouldn't be possible to do that. That shouldn't be the way. That shouldn't be the case. But the native one is catching like, I don't know, weird edge cases that if you're just using the language proper, the language already has built in. So the assembly code or whatever they write to make the VM has to care about weird things. So similarly, I think that they're just trying to keep it civil. So the left pad didn't say what it is, but you should look it up later. It's just a funny story. A lot of libraries where it's a. I am, however, like we try extremely hard to not import things just to import them. And sometimes we'll go through and like try to rip things out. We recently removed Immutable.js. Okay, applause. I've spent a lot of time in my life complaining about. I didn't wear it tonight. I have a shirt that says, "Do you know how expensive 2JS is?" That someone got for me. I should wear it. I shall wear it every Wednesday. Okay. But anyway, a lot of people were depending on this library, and the guy in a total, whatever. In a rage quit, he pulled it off of NPM, and then like a bunch of people's stuff broke because now all of a sudden you can't go grab it. People have made the case you can't actually check. You cannot actually check in your node modules folder and do much with it. I can't check my node modules folder and you can use it because unless the paths on our computers are exactly the same to get to the node modules folder. Because if you look in there, you'll see that your like paths are hard coded in. But some people have talked about like maybe it would be good if some of us like save some of this shit somewhere because I mean de facto it's sort of like on people's computers, whatever's on the NPM registry. But what happens when it gets pulled? Object.get own property descriptors. So this is a fun quote I found from the guy John Harband of the TC39 thing. I'm not gonna if you haven't used this is just like the plural of get own property descriptor. So I guess I don't really know what to say about this as far as how it would be useful. But I don't know.
It's a safe copy.
Yeah, it's not. I don't know when. I don't think we're going to be using this super regularly. Yeah, but anyway, it's in there. I think they added it for completeness. Is what this was about. So if you feel like I'm glossing over it, it's because I don't know. Like anything else, there are going to be like little weird things, and then there are going to be really important things that they add to the language. This is by far, I'd say, the most fundamental and important thing that they're adding. So this is async functions, functions that return promises. So you have this syntax here. You can see at the surface syntax I wrote at the bottom. So you just say to declare like a regular function proper, you would say async function foo, and then put your junk inside the braces, whatever is the function body. You can do this on assignment. You can do this in like inside of like an object as a method. So just like you can say this syntax here on the second to last line is a shorthand syntax, right? That's the same as saying an object has a property foo and then inside foo is a function, all of that. But you can put async before that. So I think there will be a lot of us using this in like the ES6 classes and stuff like that. And then you can also do it with arrow functions. I mentioned before, just as a gotcha, if you're a user and abuser of generators, so async generator arrow functions are not a thing quite yet. And the reason, I guess, is that they haven't. There are some edge cases that they have to figure out like how it works, and it's a little bit like you could make arguments for both ways. And so there's discussion right now about how the actual implementation, like what the pros and cons are of like going either way. I think it's kind of bizarre that generators are in the language and async functions are going to be now or are now in the language, but then like when you put them together, it's like an explosion happens. It's kind of weird that that is a thing. I don't know of too many other examples like that of like they're in in any case. So here's an example of there's obviously like a lot that goes into like what async brings to us, and I thought about trying to like break it down and explain every little bit, but the reality is that the first step, if you want to learn how async works, the first step is to try to understand, or if there are first steps to understanding this, but I'd say the first step is to try to really understand how promises work. And then once you kind of like have a grasp on promises, what you can do is just take promise-oriented code and rewrite it to be async sort of code, right? So this is the same thing, just the before and after. So on the before, we have a function. It's called fetch data. It takes in a URL, which is presumably a string. So it runs fetch on that URL, which returns a promise. So on the promise, we say then, and then we do request text dot text, which is a function, and then after that we do then again, and then we take test and we parse it through JSON.parse. Oh, this is the example. So you can't just pass. Can I?
Oh yeah.
This was the thing. So I was like, oh, you know what I can do? We were testing this code right before, because I didn't want to show you guys shit code. I was like, oh, I can just do functional for the win. I can just do that, right? What's the problem? Well, the problem is like JSON.parse takes more parameters, and so we're in. Actually, by the way, they're very useful to know what to use the parameters on JSON.parse. Because you can set, one of the things I think is people get frustrated with on, I'm sorry, not parse, stringify. This is like a total aside, but I'm a little sporadic, so here we are. JSON.stringify, you can pass it I forgot what they call it, but the third parameter is like a formatter.
It's I think the second parameter.
So I can say,
I was just staring at Angular code because I was having to plug in something else, and they actually have a formatter inside their code. JSON stringify.
Oh, cool. Okay. So does it give me IntelliSense here? No. Why would it do that? Yeah. No. It's the one I was thinking about anyway is the third parameter.
Okay.
So the third parameter will tell you. So I'll do something here. C 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Check that out. Whereas if you don't, most time when you use JSON stringify, you get that, which is kind of hard to work with. Like you want to paste it to somebody.
Yeah,
or,
that's right. The third parameter allows you to actually prettify the code.
Yep, and you just pass it a space, and it does some mumbo jumbo. It's not like it's not how I would love to have it. It doesn't have a trailing comma, which bothers me, but it's JSON, so it shouldn't. But I know, yeah, no, I got it. I know. Thank you, jumping all over. I understand, but
You can't call Ben, really?
what do you mean?
The functional passing style, you can't do that.
Can't call that.
JSON.parse, that you said that example.
No, you can't. No, you can't just pass it the function of JSON.parse.
That's weird.
So.
No, because then what's the second parameter of?
If I'm not mistaken, then has
Yeah, so then it'll pass this as the second parameter for JSON.parse. What were you saying?
then has variable impurity, so you can pass it two functions, which is resolve and reject. So it just doesn't work.
I don't know, but it definitely didn't work. This exact code. All the same, I should probably change this because we're gonna. I'll change it later. Okay. But anyway, the thing that async provides is it allows you to write asynchronous code in a synchronous manner. That's the catchphrase that people use, and I think that's why it's useful. What people who seem to like really be jazzed about this say is that it's really nice because it makes async code really easy to read and understand. And I disagree because you have to like deeply understand how promises work in order to debug this. You could read it and maybe you could write it, but the second you have a problem with it, you're pretty stuck until you get like what the promise chain really looks like. So that's async. Another thing that I'm so happy about is trailing commas and function parameters. The motivation for trailing commas in general is because if in modern day programming you're not using version control, you're probably doing it wrong for the most part. And version control systems have a hard time with like objects and arrays, and in this case function parameters that don't have trailing commas. Because if I were to remove parameter, if there weren't trailing commas and I were to remove the second parameter, parameter 2, I would have to also remove the comma of parameter 1, the one that comes after it. So now instead of one line change, which is really what happened, now it looks like 2 line changes. The other thing is, and then the same thing in reverse if I add it, right? If it's just one parameter, I guess in this case there wouldn't be on its own line, but just to say, if there was just one parameter, I would have to add the comma, which adds is like an addition. So it creates noise in the version control system, and I think that's I don't know of another reason to have it, but that's the main reason for it. Originally, people were pretty against trailing commas in JavaScript specifically because people think it looks ugly. I don't know what that means. I don't know what they're talking about.
Remember Node had the weird style for it was comma first, yeah.
That's kind of like SQL. Most people who write SQL will do it that way. They'll do the comma before the actual line.
I thought it was like comma FIRST. Yeah, so there are those that write, well, even worse, there is a crowd in JavaScript that puts semicolons first. You guys seen that? Yeah, that's a thing. And honestly, it's a pretty well reasoned thing. It's kind of like if you're used to doing that and you know you get high on your own supply constantly, then like that's cool. But like I don't know how I would feel about going into work every day and reading the you know semicolon first style.
Noise,
It's just really.
noise first.
We are considering, or at least I'm considering, not. We're very we're semicolon fanatics, but I realized that actually all of the cases where semicolons are really necessary, the linting will catch anyway, and all the ones where they won't, you can still do anyway. So I don't think that honestly, if you have like a really ridiculous linting setup, I don't think you actually need to put the semicolons in. Maybe I'm wrong, but anywho, we're getting there. So shared memory and atomics. So there's a lot of stuff that's the realms thing I was talking about earlier is a sort of like shoot off of this in a way as far as like what the concerns are. So they want to have a basically they're trying, so like one of those is tail call recursion. They're trying to, one of the things they're trying to do in JavaScript always is put the features in that the very like high level users will need, like request idle animation frame and stuff like that. This is one of those features. I think this is not something that any of us will encounter. Can anyone think of an example? I haven't said what it is, but basically it's a way for multiple service workers to like share memory is really all it is.
Parallel processing?
Yeah. So, well, concurrency stuff, right? So there's an API for it, and you can, and they have actually. So it's not just written here for vanity. If you follow this, we're gonna post these on the GitHub, and you want to learn more. If you want to learn more about it, I'm not gonna go into it because like super depth, because I think it's not like super necessary. But it's, you know, like I said, part of the purpose of this talk is to show you the things that are there, and maybe go in depth about the things that will actually, I think, have good use from. But in any case, this is the last on the list, and the tutorial that is there is actually pretty like in depth to explain why it's useful and who it's useful to, and it's mostly VM makers, and you know, maybe like React or someone like that. If you're trying to re-implement the call stack or you're crazy or something, then you could use it.
It's actually pretty interesting. Are any of you super familiar with service workers or web workers? All right, so when you pass a message to a web worker, the browser actually has to copy everything you pass in that message. So if you're passing large objects, say to do, I don't know, data intensive processing on something other than the main thread to avoid locking up your application, the browser has to stop and copy that object into the second thread and then delete it on the main thread. So this is really important because it allows you to completely sidestep that problem where you have to copy these large objects between threads when you're doing operations on them. So, you know, if you have computationally intensive things, I think one of you was saying earlier that you have computationally intensive stuff going on in your application. You can offload this to a web worker and do those operations completely off the main thread, and you won't introduce jank into your application. So that's part of the reason why this is so important.
Great. Yeah, awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
So I'd like to see that being used.
Yep. We just started. Rob did it, as you can tell. He's all up on it. We just started using workers in production this week or last week.
We used a shared worker to coordinate desktop notifications between different windows. So we don't want to spam the user with multiple desktop notifications of the same type. So we're using a shared worker to just keep track of which notifications and stuff.
Cool. And that's it. We reached the end of the track here. So these are not like the other resources. I try not to put links in the thing that are not bullshit, but these are all very good resources. If you want to see more specifically about the async stuff, is probably the thing. If I had to list one thing that you know spend the most time with, it's probably that, because that will absolutely be very widely used, I think. So these resources are all pretty great things. I will also highlight the free online book at the end. It doesn't look very good, but the content in it was very well thought out and very well put together. It's just like kind of like raw text, kind of ASCII book kind of thing. It's not an ASCII book, but check it out. I think you should check it out. So yeah, that's my stuff. All right.